Welcome to the Zube Lecture Series in the Department of Landscape Architecture and Regional Planning. My name is Peter Dunn. I'm the faculty coordinator for the lecture series. Today we're very excited to welcome James Williams. And a couple of announcements before that. So for those of you who don't know, the Zube Lecture Series is made possible in our departments by the gifts of Irv and Margaret Zube. Irv Zube was the chair of our department for a number of years. He and his wife Margaret wanted to make sure that our departments could bring in scholars from outside of campus and practitioners from outside of campus to enrich our conversations about landscape and planning and sustainability. And you will certainly hear some of that today. Come back next week if you would like to hear from Robert Olshansky, who is a planner who does disaster and resilience planning, another great speaker coming up. Before Theo introduces our speaker today, a few more announcements. So you might have noticed for the regular Zube attendees, we don't have snacks at this Zube. However, we do have snacks, they're just coming afterwards. So we really hope that you will all stay. After the lecture today, there's a gallery opening just around the corner in the cafe in the gallery around the corner called A Landscape Legacy. This is a collection of archival photographs and etchings and drawings from Frank Waugh, who was the founder of our departments ages ago, curated by our own PhD student, Mike Amato, and Professor Emerita Annalise Bischoff, who I saw a minute ago. There she is, Annalise Bischoff. So please stay. There's lots and lots of food. There's a wonderful exhibition. There's a cash bar. And we are using James Williams' talk today and the gallery opening right afterwards as sort of a kickoff celebration for the Fabos conference, which is happening this weekend. So, as I said, lots of events. The Fabos conference is about landscape and greenway planning, and it runs through Saturday, right? Saturday? Yep.
Starts tomorrow.
Starts tomorrow and Saturday. Many of you are here for that. So welcome. Lots happening, and again, we're thrilled to kick this off with James Williams. Here to introduce James is our own Professor Theo Eisenman. Theo.
Thank you, Peter. So I'm really honored to have the opportunity to present James Williams. As a little bit of background, so anyone that works in academic publishing can relate to this. We spend all this time, sometimes a year or two, working on an article, and we publish it, and then it sits in sort of an academic journal somewhere. Maybe if we're lucky, it gets cited by a few people, but it's not that often that it makes its way outside of the academic kind of conversation. So I was really thrilled when James reached out to me about, it was last spring, early summer sometime maybe? Not long after an article had come out that I worked on, and had read the article and we wanted to talk about it. And for me, that was just really exciting because that doesn't happen that often. And we just started chatting and just realized that we were having a lot of similar perspectives on a lot of things related to tree planting campaigns, urban tree planting campaigns and urban forestry. And if I were to offer just a high level thought, and this kind of relates to my own kind of trajectory over the course of my career, I've noticed I've become much more interested in the human experience of landscape, how people experience landscape. And that experience can be very different depending on who you are, where you come from, what your background is. And our conversation really kind of relates to that. And on that note, I'm going to put a plug in for our keynote speaker tomorrow, Jenny Rowe, whose research is all about how we experience landscape. That's maybe, or experience places.
Yeah, I didn't put in the abstract, I'm talking about humans, but I realize probably now hearing you talk like this, I should have put human in there.
Yeah. It's about mental health and well-being.
It's about
and places.
human-centered design, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So there's a thread here that's really interesting and compelling. So I'm really thrilled about having James here. He's going to be on for the rest of the weekend. He's going to be speaking at the Fabos conference as well. Just a little bit of background. James is a project forester with the Center for Heirs Property Preservation in South Carolina. and partner with Atlanta Forest Projects, an urban sawmill that cuts lumber from dead, dying, and hazardous trees. He grew up on logging crews in East Texas with his father and grandfather after graduating from Brown University in 2010. After working on procurement for international paper and recognizing the waste in corporate forestry, he's worked to find smaller scale community-based solutions for forest management. He's also spent a year with the Smithsonian at the Museum of African American History and Culture, researching African American environmental history. And before moving back to Georgia in 2019, yep, I have my glasses on, and continuing to work with community forest projects. Outside of forestry, James enjoys soccer, he's a huge Arsenal fan, I'm realizing, chopping firewood and reading on his Kindle. So let's give James Williams a huge UMass welcome.
Can everyone hear me? All right, great. Thank you, Theo, and thank you for responding to an email from a crazy person. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. And I'm going to try to do this in two parts, right? There's going to be a little bit of history, and then I'm going to talk about sort of the practical application of wood, lumber, and wood use. And my hope is at the end of this presentation, you start looking at trees differently. You see them in terms of board feet and not just canopy. Because effectively those two things do work together in the long run, right? And this right here, I did not cut any of this down. This is in Memphis, Tennessee. It's at a spot called Memphis Urban Wood. It's one of the few major cities in the United States that has an urban wood program, an urban wood use program. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that today. Okay. So I'm going to start, before I say any more, that I do plant trees. That's me planting a tree right there. And it's a major part of my job. Because a forest has to be managed, right? And a lot of your favorite national parks are managed, right? So Yellowstone, Great Smoky Mountains, what's the place in North Vermont? Franconia? Is anyone like that? Yeah. In the White Mountains there. These are all managed, right? There's paths there, there's wildlife monitoring, they're all doing some sort of management thing. So anytime you have human activity near a wooded area, you have to have some sort of management. And even on this campus, right? You are removing trees, you're pruning trees, you're part of that natural environment with the trees. So I think a good place to start is with climate and extreme weather events. And we recently had Hurricane Helene hit. It was in September of last year, September 2024. There was the predicted path was northwest, and it was gonna start here and kind of go and end up over here. What happened is it shifted. It's kind of hard to tell on this map, but there was a shift where it ended up hitting Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina more so than it was predicted to go right over Atlanta, and it missed us. But if you remember the headlines from that time, you saw mudslides, flooding, and homes and businesses destroyed, right? And that's not because, these trees had some pathogen or were dying, that's windthrow, right? So that has very little to do with the health of the tree, but what's happening with the soils, how anchored is it to where it is. And you can have a perfectly healthy tree, right? But if you have high winds and rain, it's gonna be thrown out the ground. And so the Georgia Forestry Commission said there was $1.3 billion dollars in damage done to Georgia's timber resources. So that's planted pine plantations. So that's plantation wood, right? So that hurricane came through, took out a lot of that, and I guess the associated industries as well, right? 1.3 is a big number, billion with a B. But if you want to check out that report, it's available. The Georgia Forestry Commission released it. South Carolina Forestry Commission and North Carolina Forestry Commission both also released reports on storm and wind and rain damage, right? And it impacted over 10 million acres, but you can see here that this is where we're going to go today. I'm going to think about this and look at this. So I took this picture last Friday. This is along I-20. So if you're going from Atlanta to Columbia, South Carolina, traveling to the southeast, you're going to take I-20. And as I mentioned earlier, with windthrow, you have these pine trees. This is loblolly. This bushy one right here is longleaf pine. But it's completely blown over. And they've been like that since September, October of last year, right? Is there anything wrong with the wind of this? No. It's just blown down. And the South Carolina Forestry Commission was like, we don't want to risk it anymore. So this was forested, just like you see right here. So this is actually, this is about 5 miles down the road from the previous slide. They came and took the high value stuff from here, right, and mulched the rest. So if you can imagine, you had this right here. But because of what happened during that storm, so you had cars that were backed up for hours. You had cars that were on the side of the road for weeks because so many trees had been blown over during Helene, right? And so that's an environment where you have a lot of human activity. I want us to think about forest for a second. This is Saluda County. If you find yourself in Saluda County, you might find yourself in a bit of a time machine. And by that, I mean you might find yourself in like 1836. It is very rural, very remote, very, very sparsely populated. And one of the forests I manage there, or help manage, is in one of the most inaccessible areas I've ever been in my life. And I've been doing this my whole life. It's like the dirt roads have dirt roads. And so anyway, we're there, and there's a forest there. I'm going to show you the forest in 2 stages, but we saw what happened to those trees when you have churches and businesses. What do you think happens to trees in a forest when there's a hurricane or extreme weather events? Anyone? Just shout it out. Who said fall? Yeah, okay, good, yes, you will have some tree failure, yeah, it's okay. This is in Saluda. This is 80 acres. This is not all the 80 acres. This is just a sample plot, right? But you have these trees that are well over 60 years old. This one here, it's a hardwood tree. These are pine. These aren't that old. And they're not planted. This is natural. It looks planted, but it's not. But you still have, we cruised the 80 acres and it was roughly 2.5 trees per acre tree failure after this. Right, so once again, without a chainsaw, without any human sort of involvement, you still have this natural rate of tree failure. Right, and so this is in December. Now let's have a quick funny story time. This was in May of 2024. So those pictures were in December of 2024. This is what that forest looked like in May of 2024. So everything's in full bloom, beautiful. And it's a beautiful older growth forest. You can see these ferns here, and you've got like this healthy distribution of trees, diversity of species, all the things you want to see in your forest, right? So it's a healthy forest. And what's helping this forest is it's really difficult to get there. So you really can't mess it up unless you really try really hard. So there's lots of things and lots of species and lots of massive trees here that I haven't really seen in many other situations. But this right here, so everyone sees this picture, and okay, what does it look like I'm doing? Who's going? Who said that? Hugging a tree? Who said that? Raise your hand. No? You're gonna raise your hand? Okay, well. Good job. Yes, it looks like I'm hugging a tree. I'm not. I'm trying to get my diameter tape around the tree to take the diameter of the tree, and Hank's the forester I work with, and he's been doing this way longer than I have. he's seeing me struggle because I've never come across a tree this large, right? I've never seen a loblolly pine tree this big. I actually submitted it to be a champion tree because it's so huge. It's 35 inches diameter at breast height, and it's over 100 feet tall. I have a hypsometer that I know I didn't use right at the time, but I know it's over 100 feet. I just don't know how much over 100 it is. For reference, the largest loblolly pine recorded is like 54 inches diameter, and it's 150 feet tall. And you can't tell, I'm pretty tall myself. I'm 6'5". I have an 80-inch wingspan. If you like swimming, me and Michael Phelps have very similar builds. So I couldn't wrap this around that tree. And I probably know what you're thinking now, like, am I going to cut this? Absolutely not. No. I would never, depends on what the price of salt is doing. It's a joke. But no, like, so this is, so go back to the first slide so you can see what it looks like after the disturbance, and then what you see, like, what it looks like there. But although this massive weather event is an outlier, right? We're not always going to have 100-mile-per-hour winds. We still do get high wind and high rain throughout the year. And how does that impact your forest when you have, like, it doesn't have to be, it can be rural or urban, right? You're still going to have tree failure. It's still going to happen. Oh, this is another funny story. I'll get to that in a second. This is in Atlanta. This was after Helene. Another wind throw situation, took out the fence, was over the road. This was the second tree I found that failed in a Confederate cemetery in the span of 1 month. And I work with Joe. Joe has the sawmill, Joe Sissoko, Atlanta Forest Products, and I'm the other half of the coin. I'm in the field. And I called him, and I'm like, hey Joe, we can make some money selling Confederate flags from this wood that collapsed in this Confederate cemetery, right? It's a Confederate cemetery. I live in the South, people, like, come on, work with me. Joe's immediate response, well, I can't say what he actually said, but it was very emphatic no. He was very clear about that. Me, on the other hand, if you want to hand me $3,000 for a Confederate flag, maybe you would. No. But, you know, yeah, that's another thing that we deal with, and the sentimentality of trees, right? So when you have a tree failure on campus, those two massive beech trees that came down, that means something to your alumni base. You can then preserve that, and the wood survives on, right? This, I don't know, has Confederate troop traitors DNA in it. But that means something to someone, right? Probably someone, not someone I actually want to hang out with, but I will take that money. Right, and so this is the question I've been asking and thinking around, is what should be done with these trees? Does it, I mean, I'm kind of already answering, does anyone else have a different idea? Come on, you work in this space, there's no wrong answers.
Mulch.
Mulching, okay, you can mulch it, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so mulch. All right, well, let's keep going, maybe we'll get a little bit more brave. All right, I think we should make products. Yeah. This is one of my favorites. This is Joe came up with this design. Remember this deal? Yeah. This is our business card. You can put a QR code on the back. It tells you who the website is. It can also tell you about where the tree came from. You can go to Lowe's, Home Depot, buy a laser engraver for $400 or $500 and make these yourself, right? Whatever design you want, whatever dimensions you want. It's not, you probably got like 2 of them in that lab across the hallway. But you can see it right there holding up the phone. One of the new designs, we put a ruler on it. And it's thinking about those failed trees as board feet. Right, so a board foot is 12 by 12 by 1 inch thick, right? That's how many board feet. If you got a tree that's 40 foot long, at like 14 inches diameter breast height, you've got about 100 board feet of product, a potential product, or lumber, assuming there's nothing else significantly wrong with the tree, right? Which does sometimes happen. But you can make a lot of that is usable. And then so some of the stuff I'm going to talk about a little bit more. Robel Awake makes this. If you like art, you like design, Robel Awake lives in Atlanta. He's a good friend. His work is incredible. I'm going to show you a few more of his chairs. To make this, less than 5 board feet. This cutting board, here, I'll skip one more. This cutting board, this is Joe's design, right? When Joe's at the mill, taking his sweet time with the wood that I've gotten, he's doing this. But this is a beautiful product. And you can cut your fish and your meat on there without worrying about microplastics, right? And to clean it, you gotta put oil and some sort of finish on there, but this is beautiful. And like I said, when Joe should be milling, he's experimenting, coming up with weird business cards and ridiculously gorgeous cutting boards. And that takes him about 4 hours to make. If that's all he did all day, it would take him about 4 hours to complete one of those. And it's reversible, sorry. So this is one side of the cutting board, that's the other. So this is how you develop a strong working relationship with your forest, by getting to know wood intimately. And we did have that relationship, right? Our predecessors, our ancestors, they did this. I think here's one of I took this from an old textbook, and maybe I wouldn't be surprised if this came out from UMass Amherst, but this concept of farm woodlands. So people settled the land. You had your corn, you had your pasture, your hay, had another hayfield here, grain, another hayfield, and some other cash crop. Your house is here. This is your farm woods right there. And in those farm woods, you're harvesting product, right? So it's not just timber. You're getting mushrooms. You're getting meat, fish, berries, anything you need, like timber and non-timber forest products. And one of my favorite non-timber forest products. This is gonna be cool. This is gonna blow my mind. This is made by the Cattle Indians from East Texas. I'm from East Texas. I did like a whole project on them when I was a kid. It's made from longleaf pine needles, right? Now, when I was growing up, I'm from East Texas. I never saw longleaf pine tree. Everyone hear me? Okay. I never saw a longleaf pine tree. And that's because it takes longleaf pine it grows a lot more slowly than loblolly, right? Loblolly, they're on like advanced genetics generation 4. It's a highly favored tree in the industry, right? They plant them 800, sometimes 900 per acre back in the day. Now we're closer to like 600 per acre. And they grow quickly for product because you get that return in a short amount of time. Longleaf, it stays in the grass stage. It stays about this big for like maybe a few years, like right? Loblolly's already here. You got 6 foot in like 2-3 years. Sometimes even faster. So in East Texas, they cut it out. So then what happens to those natives who make these things from longleaf pine, right? Do they go to Walmart and buy their baskets? You're destroying their way of life. Here's another one. This is an indigenous person from Canada, but they refer to the forest as their pantry. Right? They understand the natural environment, that they're living in harmony with it. And they're not over-harvesting or causing significant damage because it's sustained them for generations and they understand that. Another recent example is, and maybe you've heard this, what happened in California recently? Who knows? In Southern California? Fires. What was outlawed? What did the state of California outlaw a long time ago? Who knows? That the natives did.
Controlled burns.
Controlled burns, cultural burns. You said it? Hi, good job. Controlled burns, right? The state of California is like, this is bad, you shouldn't be burning the forest, but natives, for centuries, had done that. So you're gonna come in and say, no, this is how we're gonna deal with the forest and our redwoods, and we're gonna protect them for future generations. And here we are in 2024, losing, a significant portion of Los Angeles to forest fires. Okay, sorry. almost to the front part. I recently added this like less than an hour ago, but here in New England, you have your own chair-making traditions, right? So this is a Windsor chair. This is a pointer chair. This is the chair that Robel makes, that beautiful red chair. I'm going to show you some more later. But things used to take time. This is not an overnight process, right? But at auction, these chairs go for lots of money. This chair is from the 1700s. People collect these. If you ever watch Antiques Roadshow, like they love this classic Americana style of things. Richard Pointer, interesting, was a slave who, it would have been illegal for him to take this ad out, but somehow he took it out, put it in the paper, and he has this chair called a pointer chair. And Robel talks about this in his book. It's called The History of 10 Objects. Butcher the name, but it's called The History of Black Craft and 10 Objects by Robel Awake. And yeah, this is his inspiration, a black chair maker who has his own style. And if you look at Robel's work, has like this very flat, German sort of like layer to it. Robel describes his chair making process as jazz. There's improv. It's got personality. This is just standard functional chair. It has some appeal. We're going to show you some other work in a second, but okay, quick history lesson. Here's another forest that I manage. This is a soils map. It was purchased by a former slave. This 195 acres here was purchased by a former slave in 1882. Then he purchased this part here in 1907. He died in 1945 without a will. Had 10 kids. All those kids worked this land, right? And so all this, it provided everything. Same thing from the farm concept. They were able to cut wood, but they also had tobacco, corn, wheat, cotton. And this worked for them. 300 acres, that's a lot of land. And it still is. And I'll tell you a little bit more about him. So this is him right here, and this is in South Carolina. This is in Kershaw County, South Carolina, which is closer to North Carolina, so the other side of South Carolina from that map I showed you earlier. Former slave. They didn't have electricity there until the 1950s. But there were never sharecroppers, and their land provided everything. And so about this guy is, on one census record, he is listed as property. On a later census record, he is listed as mulatto. And that's because his father owned his mother. How would you let that sink in? But so we have this class of people from that time period who like my great grandmother and on my dad's side of the family, right? They also had lots of land in Texas that they farmed and made productive. Like that's where I come from. On my dad's side of the family, just farm people, right? I grew up. My great grandmother, until I was 20 years old, she farmed maybe an acre, right? So over time, this is where it gets interesting. So over time, that 300 acres. This is what it looks like today. This is all forest land. It's worth a lot of money. That's why the family found me, because they want to sell this timber. Because it's worth a lot of money. But he's got issues. He doesn't have a clear title to that land. But what happens is, over decades, right, there were 300 acres being farmed. About halfway through that, when the kids leave and go off to the cities and get educated, you're now working with 150 acres. Then you're going to 100 acres. And by the time 1980s rolls around, I guess that's here, his grandson told me he remembered them having a watermelon patch behind one of the old houses, and that was all that was left. But what happens is I actually hate this forest very much because it's junk. And it happens through this process called afforestation. So agricultural land or any land reverted to forest. Does anyone here watch Last of Us? Or seen like any post-apocalyptic show? Like with trees growing up in cities and stuff like that. That's what's gonna happen when something bad happens to all of us, hope. You're going to see nature kind of take its course. But nature's going up against human activity. So the reason I don't like this is these are junk species that are fast growing, that outcompete higher, more desirable species. So, and it varies by region, but in this, you're gonna have like winged elm, loblolly pine, sweet gum. These things shoot up fast, and they'll shade out some of the more desirable species you want to see in this area over time. It's a secondary forest. A lot of people are like, oh, this is old growth, it's so nice. No, this is not super nice. It should not look like this. I mean, it does, but that's only because this is what was there before. Right, so you got the seed bed became what used to be a place for cotton. What was interesting about this is his grandson also told me, his great grandson told me that they always worked the land by hand. So they worked 300 acres by hand because what bank is going to give a black person a loan at this time, especially in South Carolina? So you're working this by hand, you're making the land productive, you know the land extremely well. And this brings me to like my next bonus slide because I'm here. This is from James Baldwin, one of my favorite books, The Fire Next Time. It takes less than an afternoon to read if you haven't read it. But this quote where he says, you were really of another era, part of what happened when the Negro left the land and came into what the late E. Franklin Frazier called the cities of destruction. So what was the movement called when people left the land, the South, interchangeable? What was that movement called? Who knows?
Great migration.
Who said that? You want to wait right there? Okay, good job. Yeah, Great Migration. And so we have lots of people leaving the South, leaving the land they've known their entire lives to go to New York, Detroit, Chicago, because it's backbreaking hard labor, and you work hard to have a better life moving forward. And the way this ties into UMass Amherst is E. Franklin Frazier was a contemporary of W.B. Du Bois, and you have an entire library named after him. And so after you read The Fire next time, pick up The Souls of Black Folk by W.B. Du Bois, who talks a little bit about his time here in the South. And if you want to get like a PhD in like African American history, go read E. Franklin Frazier, because he's one of the earliest African American historians, right? His 1932 PhD dissertation was on African American history. So he's writing about African American history in 1932. And so yeah, these cities of destruction. We had all of this farmland. These are very black counties in the South that were being farmed. Look at South Carolina, it's the most densely populated with black farmland. It was over 60 million acres of land in 1910. Today we have less than 4 million, right? We didn't have access to farm equipment, farm credit loans, government assistance programs, but somehow we're able to persevere over this time period. And the ones who didn't, they raised enough money, working odds and ends with what they had, and were able to get out. So they went to northern cities, but not just northern cities. They also went into southern cities, right? So Columbia, Atlanta, what's another southern city? Montgomery, New Orleans, right? The cities where the jobs were. And you get black neighborhoods, right? Zoning laws that say where black people can live. And it's not just black people, right? But in California, you had neighborhoods where Asian people could live versus white neighborhoods, right? All these things. Were they given the best land and places in how to live? No, this is environmental racism, right? You in the South, it's like, go where the swamp is. Go live on the outskirts of town where it's forested. Up north, we have industrial urban sprawl. There already aren't trees. So you can live where the butchers are. You can live in the shipping quarters or near the south side of Chicago where we're storing things. So these cities already don't have trees and tree coverage for African Americans. And this is what I would imagine a typical northern city would look like, right? So you already don't see trees here in this African American neighborhood. Here's a cool example. I'm from Texas. how many of you remember Hurricane Harvey in 2017? Okay. There's a Jewish neighborhood in Houston called Meyerland. Jewish people were not allowed to live in River Oaks or some of the white neighborhoods in Houston, so they're in Meyerland, which is in a floodplain. So by law, when you want to build something in Meyerland, this Jewish community, this Jewish part of Houston, it has to be lifted 6 feet off the ground because of all the flooding that happens. You can literally look that up. It's kind of wild, right? It doesn't happen to the families in River Oaks. They're not worried about flooding. It's higher ground. And by the way, Houston is like below sea level. I don't know how that place still exists, and I'm from Texas. But this is my favorite thing now. There's this tree equity score from our good friends at American Forest. They're CEOs of Brown alum. His name is Chad. You can reach out to him on Instagram, and he will probably respond in about 2 weeks because he's trying to be hip with technology. But no, seriously, Chad's a good guy. But American Forest is one of the largest nonprofits in the country, and they came up with this metric called Tree Equity Score. $5 for somebody who can tell me what that actually means. Not now, but maybe after this. What does tree equity actually mean? Because what it does is it only captures canopy data, right? So if you look at this map here, this is Atlanta. This is downtown where we got the mayor and the state capitol, lots of pavement. If you go further out, it truly is a city of forest. Like, this is 100 out of 100. And the way tree equity score works is it grades the city on adequate, needs improvement, or very poor. This would be very poor, but it's also full of like buildings. This is the airport. Right here, this is my neighborhood. Normally at the back of my hand. And this is, you can see the canopy right here. So people make these assumptions, we make these assumptions based on tree coverage, right? Oh, that they've got to have the best schools, they've got to have clean water, access to Whole Foods and a Trader Joe's. Hell no. This is that same street. And I'm showing this to explain this, is that tree equity does not account for individual tree health. It doesn't account for individual forest health. It does not capture the relationship between the population and the forest. It's literally just canopy. And that assumption is with this canopy, you're beating extreme heats and some of the other metrics that they throw out there. And Theo, you'll like this. I mean, we hate it, but we also like this. The broken window. We talked about is the relationship with the forest and the natural area is it's the end of the month. I don't know where I'm going to be living next. I've got to get rid of all my stuff. We use the forest to dump. We use the forest to get out of this rental property, to go. Anytime you walk past this one spot at the end of the month, you will see this. This is a different forest from another part. This is a different part of the forested area in another part of Lakewood. But right here, on the 1st and 31st of every month, there you will find and see mattresses, discarded furniture from someone's home. And so this idea, is it called the broken glass theory?
Broken windows theory.
Broken window theory, thank you, broken windows. When that has become a fixture on this, and I've lived there for 3 years now, right? And without fail, like, this is where people will dump when they have to move or evicted or whatever, or get in a fight with their partner, right? And even though the city put this sign that says no dumping, it is not, save the forest from this problem. And keep in mind, this neighborhood has a 100 out of 100 tree equity score. It is a food desert. There's no healthy food options. There's nothing walkable. The South also isn't walkable in general, but like to get to a grocery store, it's not super accessible, right? We don't like that. I don't like that, and I've been working relentlessly to think about how can we repair this relationship of the population to the forest. And this is the same neighborhood, by the way. This is a beautiful, look how gorgeous this is. There's these gorgeous shagbark hickories there. You don't see that much shagbark hickory. I don't see that much shagbark hickory in Georgia outside of like the Blue Ridge Mountains. This is in Atlanta, and there's a lot of shagbark hickory in this forest. Yeah, it's got quite a bit of shagbark hickory up here, but you don't see too much of it in the South, unless it's a really nice hardwood stand. But you've got a lot of shagbark in this forest. You've got these beech trees right here, the trees that don't lose their leaves all year. Beech trees, once again, uneven stand, great biodiversity. That's my dad. And if you want to get some amazing lumberjack stories, just give him a call. And he will tell you, like, he came to see me present at the Society of American Foresters one year, and he kind of stole the show after my talk. Because he's lived it, right? He's lived it from when they were using those hand tools before chainsaws, right? Two-man saws and things like that, along with my grandpa. Which brings me to my next point. My grandpa was also a logger, right? He worked on a pulpwood crew. And maybe his great-grandfather came to Texas on a turpentine crew. I don't have time to explain what that is, but trees used to be more valued for their turpentine than their actual lumber. They sold it in Navy stores. I think it sealed ships or something anyway. We'll leave it on track. My grandpa told my dad when I was younger, I cut that forest 15, 20 years ago. You should go out there and check it again. It's time to be cut. My dad goes out there. My grandpa's right is right. It's time to cut that forest again, right? It was thinned once, and now it's on its second rotation, or maybe final rotation at that time. But they knew the forest because we've always been, right? My parents still live in the same house I grew up in. My grandparents, when they were alive, grew up in the same house that my dad grew up in. They knew every inch of the forest in East Texas. East Texas is massive, but they knew the forest around them, right? Understood it. So this idea is how can we repair our relationship with the community? And I think one of the main things is it can't come from people in a position of privilege. It has to come from the people who are living there day in and day out, right? So your city arborist, your state arborist, your state forester, they don't know and understand necessarily what's happening on the ground. They have an idea. A lot of times they're even from, we just hired a new director of natural resources in Atlanta who's from Michigan, right? She's great, and I'm working with her on a lot of these questions, but you have to be close to the land where you live and where you work to understand and to make those decisions. And that should be a community-focused thing. And what I mean by that is that cities oftentimes want to save every tree. Who here has seen tree damage on a neighbor's house or a friend's car or something at some point, right? Yeah, you've seen the tree, that's really expensive work. And as long as you have humans next to trees, you're going to have tree failure. It may not happen this year, it may not happen in the next 5 years, but eventually a limb or that tree will fail and die. So while the tree's standing, we should be thinking about what the options are. I mean, you could, if you have a lot of money, this silver maple, I mean, it's hollow, and the other half of it is split months earlier. And this is from that same neighborhood. I jokingly say, here's another one. So yeah. So the city arborist comes by and like, no, this tree gives you so many benefits and it's so great. You should really leave it. So they leave it, and then they are homeless, right? I see this every month, right? Whether it's a limb or a whole tree. And Theo also has my folder where I put all these. So sorry, I'm giving you a bunch of responsibilities, but if you want to say I have a whole collection of what this tree damage actually looks like on the ground. But this doesn't have to be like this, right? You can train the community to police and manage their own forest, to look at their own trees, to check up on them, right? To use chainsaws, to send a tree crew up. You get good enough. So who saw the beech tree being taken down? Did anyone here witness that? Those two massive beech trees? Do you remember what they used? Tell me what they used. What was it? A crane. So that's called a crane crew. I worked on a crane crew. That's a really cool thing, like really cool piece of equipment. They disassemble the tree in sections with a crane and move it off. You really want to spend a lot of money? If you see a tree that goes down because of windrow and you really, really love trees, get a crane, lift it back up, dig a bigger hole, and put dirt there. It happens. People do it. It has been done. I would tell you, it is time for that tree to be milled into lumber, but if it means a lot to you, then you can do that. But trees can and they are moved. Have been moved. This is not worth moving. But yeah, the community polices their own forest. Does that make sense to everyone? Alright, cool. Are we good on time? I only got like...
Yeah, 45.
10.
Okay, 10 is perfect. I can totally rock with 10. So, this is my favorite part of this, is that, okay, you know that trees fail naturally. We have this natural rate of tree failure in an urban or rural environment, right? We don't want to chip it because that's not the best and highest use. But we can train the community to look for this kind of stuff. We can train them on chainsaws. We can put an axe in their hand. We can put wood tools in it. There's so many different things that you can do with a tree and how you can look at a tree and interact with it. And then eventually, you know, I would love for everyone to get here and for us to bring back this Americana cottage industry, which we're currently under an administration who won't shut up about American lumber, American wood, American furniture. So like, remember remember how tree equity was a big thing, like literally 9 months ago? Well, now they're literally talking about this, right? So it's like, if you want to kind of like get in on this administration's good side, say we're making American lumber. Again. But I like to think about forests as like a fishing village in Maine. How many of you like Maine lobster or just know about Maine? Okay. So those communities, they thrive off the ocean. They thrive off the fishing industry, right? You've got restaurants, you've got people who repair boats, you've got people on the boats, you've got people who make the nets, who make the lobster traps. They're connected to the natural environment. A forest is very similar, right? But you have to have a relationship with it, right? When's the last time you read about a Maine village being gentrified? A fishing village. It's a tourist place. They have you heard of it?
I'm from Maine, and there's a lot of coastal gentrification that happens.
Darn those hipsters. They're relentless. I'm sorry.
Homeowners along the coast primarily.
Right, I mean, it is beautiful. I mean, I don't know, good books have to get written somewhere. Sorry, no, that's all. But Maine used to have a booming timber industry.
Yes, my dad worked in it.
Yeah, so you get it. But yeah, but I guess as we're in this moment in American history where everything's about bringing old America back, well, let's think about what that actually looks like. There are still mills in Maine that are just mothballed. Last I heard, there's like some Chinese investment company bought out like a few of them, and they're just holding them. But that was at a conference I heard like a couple of years ago. But yeah, there are still mills that are just mothballed in parts of the country. All right, I'm gonna kind of go through quickly because I do want to take your questions. But if we start with tree failure, and that's why I'm really leaning heavily on tree failure. These are trees that are already down. These are trees that have already failed. We're not putting a chainsaw to a perfectly healthy standing tree. We're going in and we're working with the tree that's down, right? And the community is taking care of it. The city takes 2 days to come out and clear this off the road, right? I cleared this off the road by myself in 2 hours, right? With a chainsaw. But if I can train other people to do it, the minimum wage in Georgia is $7.25. Tree service work with some training starts at $20 an hour. And if you have just a high school degree, like that is a great option for you, right? Like $20 an hour, that puts food on the table for your family. And I can use every piece of this, right? Like, well, what about you guys? You surely will use the twigs and the branches. I absolutely will. That's biochar. I I get, and that sequesters carbon. Firewood, not so much. That does not sequester carbon, labor intensive, unless you have a really expensive firewood processor, but still has lots of value. Especially, you guys are a Division I football school, but I doubt you have like the tailgating culture of the South, where they have the barbecues and the alumni come out and they literally spend like $100,000 on a weekend just to like go see UGA play LSU. In a big football game. You guys will get there one day, I'm sure. I want you to be on the cutting edge of this, because they like to say, yeah, we're cooking with authentic hickory or whatever, right? And you sell it $200 a trunk load, right? But yeah, so you got, here, and then finally, once again, like this place where I would really love to be in existing trees is this furniture, this wood use, like this craftsmanship. And I say Americana craftsmanship, but I don't just mean Americana, I mean everyone. So you've also seen pictures of little kids happy with trees, planting them. What about little kids who are happy to chop them up? And there's Joe, I talk a lot about Joe, there's Joe at his mill, giving a tour, some of his equipment. But we can replant the trees. Right, it's part of the life cycle. We focus so much on planting, that we don't think about trees at the end of their life. And it's the whole life cycle you have to focus on, because wood is a very, very valuable material. It's great to work with as a medium, and it's super sustainable. And what I like about this is less plastic. None of us like plastic, I would hope. And it's a way you can like express yourself artistically. And once again, this idea of bringing back Americana cottage industries, right? Like this New England chair making and stuff like this. And for another plug, so this is Robel. I'm going to show you some of these chairs in a second. This is Robbie. Robbie is super dope too. Robbie is like, they're both artists, right? So like, they don't really believe in real time. Hey man, I've been here 2 hours, what's up? But Robbie made this, and he really cool brass inlays. But they both make incredible furniture. Like, these are just 2 guys from Atlanta. Right? They didn't go to Rhode Island School of Design to learn this stuff. You know what I mean? They self-taught, self-expression, and they both done shows. His stuff is in museums. Like, really cool. So imagine in my neighborhood, I could just find 5 or 6 more like that, right? Or your neighborhood. And this is more of Robel stuff. I think this is absolutely gorgeous. This black chair here, once again, pointer style. But do you see what I'm talking about, the personality, the flair? Like, where else do you see that? Who's making chairs like this, right? This is a little bit more shopping, unconventional. A little more for the art lovers. This I would like put in my home. This I guess goes in a museum where I think it currently is. But look what he did. He found Cat 5 cable. He's like, you know what? I'm gonna put that at the edge. This was made from material he found on the streets of Atlanta. There's like, if you go to his website, you can see some more stuff on this. But it's just like, once again, Robbie didn't go to Rhode Island School of Design. He didn't go to Parsons. When he got out there, found a makerspace. And Robbie and Robel aren't the only 2 woodworkers I know, right? Who have like this kind of cool style. So, once again, like, in conclusion, I would say is we can't allow like decision making to come from the top down. It has to start at the community level, and we have to repair that relationship. And that relationship comes from trees that are already on the ground, right? It comes from, taking care of somebody's grandmother's house who might have a limb that's hanging over it and figure out, how can we get this down, right? I guess there are like tree service practices that are standard in canon, but, canon group must get together and figure this out. And then lastly, it's, you're not talking about chopping trees down. At no point in this whole talk I said, let's go out and cut down some trees, right? It's about getting to know trees, getting to know your forests, getting to know your woodlands from what's already there. So, that being said, Cannot measure your tree. And for those of you who do not know who or what this is Lakeith Stanfield in an incredible series called Atlanta. In one of the earlier seasons where he hangs out the window of the car and asks Ern's dad, he's like, can I measure your tree? He says a lot of wild things, but when he said that in that episode, like I immediately sprang up, so. Questions? Be nice. Oh, cool. Oh, thanks. Sorry. Yes. Yeah, I saw your name first.
This was great. I would love to hear more about the economic benefits to the community.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just explain the process of how your business interacts with the community?
So I actually just got a grant for $20,000 to do more trainings and workshops on how to teach people how to work with wood. I still gotta figure out what bank accounts to put it into, yeah, it's so I started with something simple. I started with something simple. I was selling firewood. Actually, there's a local business. I get free barbecue from the best barbecue place in Atlanta, and then another local business. It actually increased her foot traffic because she bought one of those smokeless fire pits. And it became something that people wanted to have a reservation for and go to that restaurant. So the wood is coming from down the street, and the fire pit's very small, so I'm cutting it 10 inches, so not like standard size firewood, but I've got a process to where I can cut these smaller, like more cutesy pieces of wood that people like to kind of put in the fire pit. And so now, it's called Red's Beer Garden. If you go to Red's Beer Garden, she gives me a shout out on her Instagram page. You gotta scroll kind of far. But she called the process hyper-local. But because we have so much wood in Lakewood, right, like it's everywhere, you can take it on the street, you can make something with it, right? Or someone can pay you to clear it from their yard. I've been paid to clear the roads, right, for people who had guests coming. Like my neighborhood calls me Jimmy Lumberjack. Because, access to arborists and tree service, it's expensive. Like, not everyone has an arborist. Not everyone has $5,000 for a simple tree removal, right? There was a tree removal done in December in Summerhill, $18,000. Let me give you that. $18,000 to get a red oak removed. That was not a happy Christmas for that family. And their insurance does not cover it. Your insurance only covers it when it destroys your house. Does that answer your question a little more? Or? Yeah, no, I mean, there's lots. I guess there's lots of ways that me and George will kind of figure that out, like making these, teaching people how to make stuff. Like, what else can we make from this wood? Bowls, spoons. Where does your imagination take you? But yes, the skill of learning how to use a chainsaw. And then being trained in that, you can then go work for a tree service company, right? Because they're always hurting for people. Like, I've never seen a tree service company that's like, oh yeah, we got plenty of guys, right? They want to have as many people on a crew as possible, right? So they can hit multiple jobs. So it's a skill set, kind of like, metalworking, welding. It's just like a chainsaw is not a simple machine. Even I'm still learning bits and pieces of it, right? Yes.
There's been a surge of volunteer tree planting people, like tree folks in Austin. I worked with them quite a bit. And these companies like Planet Geo and Davy, they're supporting these and they're putting trees in places that may not be the right place. Are you seeing that as a positive impact, of course, because there's more trees and decarbonization, but are you seeing the location or the placement of the plant material going in the wrong place often with these, or are you not seeing an impact at all? Because the volunteerism, there's not a real guide of this is the right plant for the right place. Maybe it's a Norway maple that was donated and they put it underneath a power line. So are you seeing any of this in your urban kind of forestry stuff, timber stuff?
Yes, I'm glad you said that. So there's an organization in Atlanta called Trees Atlanta, and they planted longleaf pine in very thick soils that aren't well drained, that it's not well suited for, right? Longleaf pond like sandier soils that you see in South Carolina and other places, so well drained soils. They put it there for the extent, right along the belt line in Atlanta for aesthetics. A lot of times they do get it wrong. It's a landscape architect decision and not a decision based on the environment, right? It's what looks good. I think it really takes careful planning, lots of conversations to know what actually goes in here. But it's also the photo op, right? And the headlines you get. You plant 500 trees in a weekend, every newspaper eats that up. Every local news station has their fielding piece for the Sunday evening news. Young people get Instagram photos to say, look, I planted trees this weekend, hashtag green earth, whatever. And I'm not saying these are bad things, right? I think it's in the right direction, but as you can see, it's a much more involved process. Or if you're going to put a tree in the ground, go to a woodworking class. See what that tree looks like at both ends of life. Yes.
So you're suggesting kind of alternatives to like tree maintenance in cities, like when they come down. But what are like the current standard practices when a tree comes down? Like where does that wood go?
The city ships it or dumps it.
Okay.
Unless they have a wood use program, like in Memphis, like in Minneapolis, Baltimore has one, Camp Small, where you can divert some of this wood. So, yeah.
I just love your presentation, or kind of thinking in like recycling and in circles, not like, making a better use of the things that are, even the chairs, I mean, not only the wood, even the cables, and then it becomes a project of art, of identification, of self-identity, and I really like that. It's, I think, terrific to work. I mean, the woods is trees are abundant, what we learn. So, I think it's a terrific story. So.
Thank you. Yeah, and once again, I really like I said, if you can get Roselle's book, get a copy, it's a very easy read. But without him learning that craft, working with wood, without that tradition, you don't get him using that Cat 5 cable as the seat, right? Which is just so cool to see. He doesn't even go there. And so my idea is, how do we train a new class of community woodworkers, right? Where does that start? You guys have lots of trees on campus, and you have a woodworking space. So I usually go to every elementary school, and when they come to the Arboretum, have a whole session on carving trees and stuff. Give them chainsaws. Do not give a chainsaw to a child. That's a joke. No, if that's everything, I'm going to be back there.
All right, well, thank you so much.